Okay, so we primed the model. I primed in with zenithal priming, so from below it's black and from above it's white. Uh, the main topic of this tutorial is the color use. I will use only the red, yellow, and blue with white, of course, and there will be a lot of color mixing. Uh, Also, one big part of the tutorial will be non-metallic metal, and everything else from start until finish. Uh, there will be a lot of cool details, light placement, building the volumes, everything you need to have a good completed piece with all the values necessary for all of your artworks. So let's start. So yellow and blue. If you ask about the colors, those are chimera colors, and I use the blue with red shade, and also white. This one is from scale 75 Warfront. Okay, good enough for start. And now, first we will start with adding shadows, building the shadows. So in this particular tutorial, I will focus more on warmer shadows and color highlights. Or yeah, I think that's good for this tutorial. And then in the next one we can try something different. So let's start. For shadows, I would like to have something like brownish, very dark red, something like this. And I will start adding in the all dark areas, even a bit more darker.
So you made dark and light areas with zenithal priming,
Yeah.
and now you are following the concept of
Yes.
shadows and light.
Is it visible? Okay.
Yes.
So I'll just start by adding the dark warm shadows. I still I really want on this tutorial because I think many of painters are curious to see how also the bright shadows works, and in this tutorial we can work on that as well. So it doesn't have to be very dark color to be indicate the shadows. We'll use the contrast between warm and cold, so you will have that contrast as well.
And also the tonal values.
Yeah, of course. So So the thing is, I don't really have one constant tone. You always add a bit of blue or a bit of red to have different variation of the colors. You don't use just pure red from the bottle, and also not like you can see on the palette. I never mix completely both of those colors. I always leave some bits of blue or red inside. So that gives me a lot of different variation and gives so much richness to the colors. I just it's hard for me to make steps, because I usually don't use steps. Most likely I will start adding highlights as well in this area, in this stage, but
for the
for
tutorial.
the sake of the tutorial, I will focus to be as much as possible in steps, so for you guys to see and understand how this works. You don't have to be too much careful this stage, because it's just applying the shadows in the old areas to build later contrast with it, but so it can be messy, and I think that messiness will also give you a variety of tones and different.
So it doesn't matter if you go with that color on the places where highlights will come later, but the most important is to fill all the shadows.
Yeah, because without shadows you cannot have the good contrast. Yeah, and the one main thing when you paint miniatures, and especially the small like this one, you need to have a good contrast so the viewer can see the depths of the details.
Yeah, it will pop out.
Yeah.
But when you mix blue and red, you put the color with more blue on the places that are darker, and with more red on the places where the...
Yeah, the idea is the idea is to create the more saturated part. You will see later will be the upper part of the model, with the spell in the hand and the face, and maybe something happening on the stuff as well. So we will keep that area more saturated, because that's our focal point, and by having more vibrant saturated colors on the upper area, it will help the viewer see that focal point, and will push the darker and more muted colors in the lower part, in the shadows. So that's because that's not the main point of interest on this piece.
So now you are pre-shading even the middle tone suite, right?
Yeah, just I want to cover pretty much whole model like this, because I think it will be much easier for understanding as well how this this shading works and what are the results of this technique. I will even add a bit of orange, some weird shading.
So you're adding the orange only on the lighter parts,
Yeah,
on the upper parts.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the one that will be more highlighted.
I'm bringing the focal point there.
Let's say that this is the pre-painting with just shading all the stuff together.
So basically this is the base coat.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
As you can see, I already have some contrast built.
On volumes as well.
Yeah. Introducing also different tones, different variation of tones, different shadows. As I don't want to keep the same value of the shadows through the whole model, and as I mentioned, the upper part will be more vibrant than the lower part of the model.
Yeah, it already is. So this progress is building shades, but also undercoating and
yeah,
it's your surface for next stages.
yes. This way I will have really good base starting point where I already have all build up the lights and the shadows. Of course there will be some increases in contrast, but to gain that I need to have very good shadows. Okay, so I cover most of the shadows, and you can notice all these different varieties of reds and browns that are mixed with dark blue. So we have all these different shadows. What I'm gonna do now is even increase some of the depths of the shadows. For example, here. So now I'm going with smaller brush just to have nice definition, but still I'm leaving a lot of all those
Lighter.
yeah, nice places.
And also, when colors dried, they look a bit darker now. But not on the parts that were white.
Yeah,
It depends on the mixes you did.
So let's focus on this chest. So now I will start adding the first highlights on the armor, and let's just make a mixture of the color I need for the armor. So it will be turquoise armor. Just let me find the exact color I have in mind. Some different varieties of this color, just right there. Something like this. It will work good. So now I will start adding, and also I will have some OSL from this part as well, but let's focus now on the frontal part, and later we will do OSL. So as we said, the light hit from above. We'll just highlight all the areas. So again, I'm not using the straight one tone. I like to have different tones of mixtures of turquoise and green for the highlights. And now I'm exploring and looking where the light will hit where and how that will look.
So you're sketching some tones for the armor, but also sketching the lights.
Yeah. So this is like the first sketch. Now I'm gonna do some detailing. Fine detailing, well, give more. So I'm now exploring, following the lines of the model, testing how the highlights will hit and bounce, and so there, as you can see, it's very free, and I just want to feel have the picture in my head of this model, and so far I really like the 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 process, the journey. So even though I use some of the contrast, I can go back on the shadows and maybe strengthen some of the shadows, but we are still in exploring phase. And when you have this phase down, when you went through whole model, then you know where you can
Add more light or more
come back.
shadows.
Yeah. So there is no mistakes that. So by these brush strokes you can also get some nice texture of the metal as well, explaining how
The shape.
looks and how basically some scratches as well.
That looks really nice.
And I'm just focusing on this little area just for me to have a visual how the effect will look like, so I can then introduce this to the rest of the model. for example, now I have the feeling that I can maybe go back on the shadows as well and increase the contrast. So let's say here I will add a shadow as well here as the light hits from above. So let's have some shadows there, stronger.
It gives the instant contrast because the color next to it is very light. And with a darker tone, it really pops out. You can see the detail.
Yeah. So there, and maybe even like thinner paint, like here, just to have more depth in this area. You can all refine later, but for now I just want to have all those colors bouncing around and having the nice contrast and saturation as well. So you will notice here that I'm sketching, highlighting and blending, all in one step. I'm using my brush strokes in interaction. They are thin and overlapping, creating nice tones and textures. Of course, keeping in mind a light placement. I am following the sculpt of his armor, building overall volumes as well as a volume of details. I'm keeping the bright red underneath, going slowly toward the highest highlights. Notice how I change the angle of my brush, using it to create nice texture of brushstroke, still keeping those variation in tonal mix rather than going step by step. Okay, so now just continue building this highlight tone that will where it will hit the metal parts of the model. Something like there. There as well. Now let's go fastly over the rest of the metal surface, following the same procedure.
sketching the mid-tones, but where the lights will hit.
Yeah. I'll focus on the main highlight areas. Notice how I define shape by sketching lights. This is very important.
So color placement at this moment is based on the shape that you're working on.
Yeah, and the material, because this is metal. I have a lot of those tiny little reflection as well. I'm trying to have the brush strokes that explain the material.
Mm.
Play of light and shadow or reflections create the contrast here, as well as a color and tones. Brushstrokes and blending define the material feeling. For non-metallics, it is important to have good contrast and reflections. Just to indicate some lights.
So you have lights and also the reflection, the bouncing on the lights on some edges and lower parts of the metal as well.
Yes.
The shape and the overall look, but at the later stages you will define
Yes, and
it more.
yeah, it goes all pretty much also back and forth.
Yes, because some parts look defined and probably you will work more on them because it looks like you sketched them, but some of them looks on the legs, for example, and it looks like you have the final lights, but it's just for the sketch.
Yeah. Well, it really depends how the piece goes. So, for example, I can go back on some areas and refine them. I can leave some. With this stage, as I said before, I want to have this upper part as a focal point. So that area will be more highlighted, more detailed than the lower part.
Yes. It looks like you will have some wider areas of highlights also on the upper parts rather than on the lower.
Yeah, because it will be more bright than the lower part. Sorry.
It looks like you're leaving some brush strokes a bit transparent so the
Yeah,
color below can be visible.
yeah, I want this because then I have all this richness. No, I'm building more and more toward the highlights now. So also I will add this color a bit. Maybe I'll choose a bit different, maybe a bit more yellowish tones, maybe more orange, more ochreish tones in this area here, and this area, and just a bit of indication for me to.
It's separating
Mm,
the parts and
Different.
materials.
yeah. Also. So let's go back on detailing. So now I will try to show you some detailing work on the upper part of the chest to continue where we stopped. Let's make this more very bright blue. So you can now notice how every brush strokes from the previous stage help me have this nice texture of the metal. Later on we will introduce some OSL on this shoulder pad, but
for now you're building it.
Just for the sake of tutorial. And
it looks like it's seen many battles, but still in a good shape. The final lights, they really give a lot in definition.
And sharpness. Notice how I constantly play with color variations. Make more blue, make it more green, connecting all those tones together in clear interaction.
So here we have color mixing visible on the palette, on your finger and on the model, because it's never mixed too much. Just
Yeah, I like to keep the different variation on the brush. Adding those clear white reflections as my strongest highlights.
fun seeing how color changes from the palette on your finger and then on the model because of all the colors around. It really changes the attributes and it gives the nice values.
It's fun to paint like this. I'm returning some of the lost values, but remember, definition that I was adding with shadows, in this stage I did it with final highlights. So let's go through the rest of the metal parts in same approach.
So you are now keeping the, let's call it mid-tone values on the legs, and that looks like your brightest tone there.
Yeah.
Now it is nicely visible what you mentioned on the start, because I can see that very bright red and it looks like a shadow.
And just because it's in a contrast with blue. make some mistakes by going over some of the shadows. We can come back later and fix them, but for now, just focus the definition of the highlights and where they hit and how they reflect. We have all this very interesting spectrum of colors on the model. Okay, so this will be the stage. I will leave it the upper part of the armor is the stage I want now to have. It can go even deeper into smoothing out some of the details, but for all intents and purpose of this tutorial, I want you guys to see how it works, how the contrast works, how the strong highlight with deep shadows, but also very saturated bright shadows. So even though some of the reds are very bright, they give you the information that that's the shadow, that's the dark part of the armor.
Also the good way of using brush strokes.
Exactly, and also with gold highlights you get even increased contrast, and that's the purpose of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this part of this series of tutorials.
Metallics.
Yeah, and I will finish the whole model using this technique on the whole metal parts. Then we're going on the next one where I'm gonna do the...
So in the next video you will do the fabrics.
The fabrics, the cloth, all the clothing. I believe that will be for the next one, maybe even the base. Then we'll go doing some OSL, and
for the end
the face and the hair. So stay up, stay tuned, and hope you will enjoy and have fun in painting. Bye bye.